You get yourself psyched for a job interview, you have a great interview, you get the job, and then you find out the company culture is awful and you hate working there. Is there some way that you can avoid doing that? Hello again, everyone. I'm Eli's dad with Project Eli, where we educate, we lead, and we inspire. And you know, a lot of times our focus is on getting the job. But one of the key things that you need to keep in mind is, since you're going to spend the greater portion of your life at that facility, at that job, you want to make sure that there's a winning culture. It's something that you're going to enjoy doing, that it's going to be worthwhile for you. So I had thought about that, and because I've worked at places that are great, and I've worked at places that are, let's just say, not so great. Came across an article by a gentleman named Jack Wilder called 10 Little Things That Can Highlight a Bad Company Culture. Big shout out, great article, got some good points to it. I'm going to add a few things of my own. Okay? No company openly tells you that they have a toxic culture. They don't advertise that their employees are unmotivated, their customers are dissatisfied, or their leadership has about as much trust as Pinocchio. And yet you need to know that. You know, and if you're evaluating a prospective employee or considering a new supplier or deciding on a potential merger with a company, you need to understand that company's culture, or you end up living with those results. While few companies actually advertise that information, you don't really need them to, because there are some clues, minor things that will tell you a little bit about the company. We're going to go over some of those, and that's how you find that out, all right? They're not foolproof, but if you're lacking information, take some of these clues. So keep an eye out for these signs. There's 10 of them. I'm going to go over 5 today and 5 next time we get together. The first one is, and this is from the article, okay, they have assigned parking spaces. Now, I had never heard that one before, that they have assigned parking spaces. That's a sign of a bad culture. I had heard when you see people back in to their parking spaces so they can make a quick getaway when it's, time to leave, that's a bad sign. But imagine, you're texting all your employees each morning and you remind them that company management sees themselves as above the frontline workers. Everyone could start their workday with a refresher button that titles matter more than contribution. That's what assigned parking spaces do. Every employee starts your day by walking past a bunch of reserved parking spaces. They get an immediate reminder that the company is happy to sacrifice their convenience if it makes the boss's life a little easier. In other words, what you're looking for is, in the leadership of your company, is servant leadership, and not people that say, me first, okay, I've achieved, so I get all these extra little bonuses. There's a book by Simon Sinek that's a great book called Eaters Eat Last, and that would apply to parking spaces as well. There's absolutely no reason that managers should feel entitled to a closer parking spot than their employee. And if the boss doesn't want to walk, they should get up at 6 o'clock and get to work early. And to be very candid with you, that's actually a great sign, because when you go and you see the boss's car parked close and they don't have assigned parking spaces, that tells you that that person is ready to rock and roll and get there. I was always there. I was always the one that put the coffee on, got there before my administrative assistant, at least a half an hour to an hour. The good leaders do that because they want to assess, they want some quiet thinking time, they don't want the phones to be ringing, and they want to be in a position where they're planning their day. That's, it's not an absolute, but I'll tell you, places I've been, when the boss gets there early and they're thinking of, they're organizing their day, that's a better place to work. Second sign, when you're being interviewed, this is that you're running into a toxic work culture. When you're being interviewed, they're trying to sell you on their perks and not advancement, or not their product, or not the value that they add. People want to do challenging work that matters alongside a strong collaborative team. That should always be the differentiator, not the presence of an extra pool table or a TV room or free coffee. If a company tries to sell you on their perks instead of their work, that's a red flag. Perks are not a culture. They can enhance a good culture, but they never make up for a bad one. You know, I'll buy my own snacks. I'd much rather have a work environment that's challenging and collaborative, and people are locking arms together because they have a mission that they want to pursue. Third clue. That's the way it's always been done, is an acceptable justification for policy. Maybe that's true, but that doesn't mean it's right. You know, just because you've done something for the past 50 years doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. If anything, it probably means exactly the opposite. You know, because the world changes. It's naive to think that your practices don't change with it. If a company's following the same 1950s protocol, chances are they're not in the groove. Chances are they're in a rut. And when people use "it's always been like that" or "that's just the way it is" as justification, they're really saying they don't know. They don't know why they do it that way. It's always been done that way. You know, when I think of that, it makes me think of something that I promised to myself, and I've kept that promise, Eli, my number one son, because one of the things I hated as a kid was I'd say, "Why do I have to do that?" And the parent would say, "Because I said so, that's why." I always promised myself that I would never ever say that to my children, and Eli, I never have. Isn't that the equivalent of, because that's the way it's always been done? Trust me, you can take that to the bank. And you know how I know? Because I said so, that's how. Fourth one. This is very clever. How do you know it's a bad work environment? One of the things about a work environment is people have pride in the fact that they work there. As a matter of fact, when you talk with them outside of the workplace, they're always talking about work, or they're talking about, you know, at my company we do this, it's all, you know, good stuff. Here's something. When you see trash on the floor, there's only one reason why there's trash on the floor. It's because the employees don't care enough to pick it up. And when people take pride in their work, they take pride in the environment. And when they don't, they're content to just walk past it and say, excuse me, somebody else will get that. Now, it doesn't have to be excessive. It's not as though you're walking through, you know, the inside of, you know, the dollar store or something like that, but there's small wrappings or screws on the floor or papers on the floor, or, you know, people just don't care enough to pick it up. It tells you a little bit about their culture. And the fifth one that we're going to talk about today is that people preach about the chain of command. You know, I've talked about some of these in previous videos, but it's always good to get a perspective from, you know, a different author or you know, a different angle, because something that I say may click and something that I say may not, and the way somebody else says it may give you an aha moment. But, you know, the chain of command, to succeed in an agile world, people need the freedom to communicate with anybody else in the organization without unnecessary bureaucracy. If a company's communication structure matches their organizational structure, it's a sign of too many self-important middle managers. Managers that hide behind the chain of command do so because they value their title more than they value their contribution. For them, not being involved is a sign of accomplishment. Okay, it's like, you know, that doesn't come to me until it's gone to this one or whatever. You know, and one of the things that one particular place I worked had a small number of people working there. It was less than 50. And they insisted upon having the protocol of, you know, when you see the boss, you can't just stop the boss and say, hey, and then explain what it is that you felt was important enough. So that's not the way you do it. You got to go through the chain of command. When you're working for General Electric or you're working for the United States government, I can understand that kind of a line of thinking. But when you're working with a small company and you're preaching from the pulpit about what a great family you have, one of the things is you want to keep those lines of communication open. As a matter of fact, one of the things that big companies really despise is the inability to communicate from the top to the bottom in a very quick way, to be able to get that communication out there right now. So why, as a small company, would you want to invent an additional roadblock when you don't have to do it? Doesn't make sense to me. All right, so anyway, let's review the 5 different things to look out for when you want to avoid working with a toxic company. 1, they have assigned parking spaces. 2, they try to sell you on their perks and not the values they give out to the community or to you or the opportunity that's there for you. They say things like, that's the way it's always been done. You find trash on the floor. People don't have the pride of the workplace. And the 5th one today was people preach about the chain of command. I want to point out, give a big shout out once again to, the author Jake Wilder, 10 Little Things That Can Highlight a Bad Company Culture. I found it to be a very enlightening article. But you know what? Some of the things they say there are clues, so you don't want, when you're being interviewed, remember, you're interviewing them as well. And because we will never end a meeting on a philosophical note, let's all get out there and charge! I'm Eli's dad.